What do you think of when you hear the words South Africa? I can answer that question for you. You think of wild animals running wild, students going to school in the trees, and people riding elephants to work. South Africa is not about that. South Africa is a first world country with a big past. The apartheid was what made South Africa known worldwide. I'm here today to speak to you about apartheid, on how and what and when it happened. I am originally from South Africa, so I can give you a lot of information about the apartheid. The apartheid has a long history on what it was about, who benefited more, and how it ended. Firstly, the apartheid was about keeping non-white people away from white people. Non-white people were looked upon as waste compared to whites. Whites believed that they should be in control of everything that happens in South Africa. They felt they were made to control all non-whites. Mark Sanders states in his article, Remembering Apartheid, that apartheid was, in the most general terms, an interdict against development of social formation. Although Afrikaner nationalist politicians, intellectuals sometimes frightened the folk with images of being swamped by the vast black African mass or being plowed under as a people, the nature of social formation was never outlined in precise terms. Non-white people were not allowed to use the same restrooms as whites, because this was seen as disrespectful towards them. White people thought they were better than everyone else and they should not be around others. Non-white people were also not allowed to attend the same schools as whites. This was like this because non-white people were made to be slaves according to whites, and they did not deserve a good education. If any of the rules were broken, non-white people were not even asked questions. They were arrested and put straight into prison. Whenever non-white people were walking in the streets, they had to have a valid ID on them at all times. If a valid ID was not found, they were immediately arrested and taken to serve a hefty prison sentence. Secondly, all apartheid rules were made to, of course, benefit white people. No rules were made that would make the standard of living for non-whites better. Jose Holscher states in her article, A More for All, raising public space in a post-apartheid Cape Town, that not only people were labelled members of a specific racial groups, but South African cities too were strictly built along racial lines. Legislation culminated in the 1953 Group Areas Act ensured that groups lived in separate neighbourhoods which differed greatly. Whites in the Pleasant Green suburbs and coloured and Africans in bleak townships. This segregation extended to all levels of space, from public spaces and services to private homes, where provision was largely made for separate toilets, servants of colour. At the time of apartheid rules being made, the South African government was run by white people. So therefore all rules and regulations were made to benefit white people only. All white people got all the high-paying jobs, therefore increasing the luxury of life and causing any hope of non-white people to have a decent life to be demolished. Lastly, F.W. de Klerk ordered the release of Nelson Mandela from prison. This is where the new South Africa began to build and the hopes of non-whites had been uplifted. Nelson Mandela was released from prison in April of 1990. Nelson was given a life sentence because of treason against the South African government, but only spent 27 years when he was ordered to be released by the current president of the time, F.W. de Klerk. Jeff Dick's article, Long Walk of Nelson Mandela, states, described as an upstart, master of injury, and bomb-throwing revolutionary, he became a skilled politician. South African leader Mandela is profiled in the frontline title. The pivotal phases in Mandela's life, including his participation in civil disobedience, leadership in the African National Congress, lengthy incarceration, and triumph release. An eventful election to the Republic of South Africa president are covered in more journalistic fashion than Mandela. Son of Africa, father of a nation. Non-white people were given the opportunity to vote for the first time in 1994, and this is when Nelson Mandela was elected as South Africa's first black president, and he changed South Africa. Betty Glad article states our inquiry centers on the interaction between the two leaders during his first phase of their relationship, which extends roughly from 1990 to 1994. This period encompasses F.W. de Klerk's dismantling of the apartheid laws and his struggles to reform the existing political order. Mandela, meanwhile, was faced with the daunting task of transferring the African National Congress from a loose collection of groups allied against apartheid into a viable, unified political utility. During this time, de Klerk and Mandela shared the overachieving goal of constructing a transitional constitution, arranging the first truly representative elections in South African history. South Africa has had many points in time that have helped make South Africa the place it is now. There have been many people that have contributed to this, not only the government officials but also the citizens of South Africa. To summarize my three main points of my speech, I stated that South Africa apartheid, which ended in 1994 with the election of Nelson Mandela as president of South Africa. During apartheid, non-white people were kept away from white people. White people were the most beneficial of the apartheid, and F.W. de Klerk ordered the release of Nelson Mandela. South Africa is a beautiful place that should be visited when everyone has the opportunity to do so. I will now show you the South African flag. The South African flag has 6 different colors in it, ranging from red, white, green, and blue, yellow, and black. South Africa is called the Rainbow Nation for having many different groups of languages spoken and the different colors of people. Thank you for listening today.